Good afternoon, Commission officers, and thank you for joining. This is being recorded and transcribed so that you can absolutely access it at a later time. We are going to go over the promotion series, specifically the Commissioned Officer Effectiveness Report. My name is Robin Davidson. I'm the Acting Director for the Division of Commission Personnel Support, and I welcome you in joining in this series. What we're going to go over is kind of some tips for preparation. What does that timeline look like for this year? Submission process, some officer role of that concurrence, non-concurrence in that COER. What is the rebuttal process, a complaints and redress process, some officer requirements, and then really tips for your COER. So in preparation of starting your COER, we highly encourage you to go into your readiness red dog to look to see who is your listed supervisor. The electronic COER system is tied to that supervisor listed in your supervisor information. If it is incorrect, we definitely encourage you to correct it before you get started on your COER. We also encourage you to use some sort of word or equivalency to prepare as part of your COER. So that way you have it all written out. You can look to see misspelled words. You have others that can provide additional information, really when it comes to your duties and responsibilities, your goals, and your accomplishments. Timeline for the 2024-2025 COER season is it was opened on 1 September. Due to the brownout, it officially opened on the 4th of September. Your COER is due to your rater by the 31st of October of 2024. Then the rater is required to have it done and completed to your reviewing official by 30 November of 2024. In between those steps, it then will require your signature of that concurrence or non-concurrence as the officer's COER. And then ultimately it is submitted to the agency liaison for final review and signature by 31 December and transmitted to CCHQ on 15 January. If you did have some sort of transfer, either by supervisor or officer within this time period, definitely reach out to the regional liaison and we can assist you in determining which one should be your annual COER, which one should be an interim COER, and if the interim COER is optional, whether you as an officer want to complete that interim COER or not. So the submission process started differently last year and it has continued in the same process this year. The one big difference is now the officer will sign after the reviewing official. This really gives you as an officer the opportunity to look at your entire COER before concurring or non-concurring with it. And then lastly, again, the regional liaisons will have the opportunity to look at the entire COER. And then if there are any changes or any mandatory statements that need to be removed that are not qualified in the COER, that we have that opportunity to go back and return. So the officer's role for concurrence and non-concurrence is that you can choose to non-concur on your COER. It is perfectly fine, but this should not delay or stop your COER from being processed. If you do elect to non-concur on your COER, there are many options that you can take. That's in here that April was waiting for. 1 second. There are many options that you can take if you non-concur on your COER. So please let us know. Regional liaisons are here to help you, walk you through both that rebuttal and that complaints and redress process. We really highly encourage you to reach out to your supervisor first and have a conversation with your supervisor. Usually that conversation helps the supervisor understand and kind of reshape that COER if needed. So the rebuttal process for officers, if you do not agree with either the ratings or the comments on your COER, you may submit a rebuttal. There are specific guidelines. We did not include it in here, but most certainly reach out to the regional liaisons. They will assist you with that rebuttal process. It is now officially submitted through the electronic COERs system, and it can be reviewed outside of it if you want to send it to the regional liaisons to make sure that those checks and balances are completed. It is our recommendation that the document be professionally written and that it clearly identifies those itemized areas that you disagree with. For an example, if you disagree with a statement in section 1 of leadership, then we definitely encourage you to clearly identify those sections that you disagree with. And that way it is clear to everybody else that reviews that rebuttal as to exactly which sections that you disagree with. And really, we really want to encourage is that the rebuttal process only reflects those comments or responses that are internally to the COER. So you can only rebut those things that are written, not any assumptions, not anything outside the COER, but specifically written or marked within the COER. After the officer does submit the rebuttal in the COER system and it's routed to the liaison, it is electronically sent to both your rater and reviewing official. This gives the rater and reviewing official an opportunity to provide comments to your rebuttal. Rebuttals for all COER types are accepted in inclusion in the EOPF within 90 days when the completed COER is placed in your EOPF. This may or may not display in your OPPVS by the time the promotion file closes. So if you do non-concur on your COER and you wish to have that rebuttal submitted, you do have up to 90 days to submit it, but it may or may not be in your file by the time that promotion closes. If the rater or reviewing official does submit comments to your rebuttal, they have 60 days to provide those comments through the electronic system. If the rebuttal, in addition, you can submit what is called a complaints and redress process. It is an informal attempt for a rater to adjust a COER if unsuccessful, and the officer may seek redress to that formal complaint. Truly what this comes down to is if you still want to provide a formal request for your COER to change, you can submit it through that complaints and redress process. I highly encourage you reaching out to the regional liaisons because the complaints and redress process has very specific timelines and how you document, and they can help you assist in submitting that complaints and redress process. The COERs policy is really to resolve complaints at the lowest level at all possibility. So really, it still follows the same chain of command as your COER is submitted. So once you submit that complaints and redress, it will go to your rater, it will go to your reviewing official, and then it will go to a final reviewer, which is within your chain of command to make a final determination. If no final determination is made, it can be referred to the Surgeon General for the Surgeon General to make a final determination regarding your complaints or redress. So redress may be sought for, but not limited to. So there are options outside of this, but discretionary acts or omissions of a supervisor or senior official that has a direct or adverse effect on an officer or is in violation of law, executive order, regulation, or policy, beyond legitimate authority that the supervisor or senior official has. If it is determined that it is arbitrary, capricious, or abuse of discretion, and or if it is clearly unfair. Redress may not be sought if it's related to the working environment, interpersonal relationships between officers and anybody in their chain of command, mid-cycle performance review, or an issuance of a performance improvement plan, any counseling session regarding performance or conduct, and lastly, complaints seeking disciplinary action against another officer or employee. So the COER officer requirements is really 3 main sections that officers have a portion to write to. And that is your description of duties and responsibilities, your goals, and your accomplishments. So your description of duties is really your main duties or responsibilities in your job based upon your current position. So what position are you attached to? Not an acting role, but the current position you're attached to. If you are in an acting role, we highly encourage you to put it in your accomplishments because it is a position that you have been attached to or assigned to provide additional responsibilities. But for purposes of promotion, they're looking at the position on record that is attached to your PIR. So your description of duties and responsibilities should be, what are you responsible in your position? Your goals should really look for work-related goals. And it is long-term and short-term. So short-term is, what do you want to accomplish between now and the next promotion cycle? Long-term goals is, what are you looking in the next 1 to 5 years? Really make sure that they're attainable and they can be accomplished. One of the big things is COERs are looked at the past 5 years. So as a promotion board, they can go back to your last 5 years and look to say, do you still have the same goals for the last 5 years? Have you accomplished them? Is it something you're still working towards and it's in the accomplishments that it may be part of those long-term goals? So definitely make sure that what you put in your goals is attainable, but also that it's something you want to do. What is it your goal, your individual goal? And for your accomplishments, we definitely encourage to look at those precepts and benchmarks. They are going to be, I say, your bread and butter of what it's going to help you identify that leadership, that officership that you need to have when you go to write your accomplishments. Your accomplishments should be primarily your job. What are you doing for the agency in the position you're assigned? Does not include your PAGs, your PACs, your officership itself. It really should focus on, what are you doing for your job, your patients, and the agency. Be specific and be clear. One of the big things we see is there's a lot of generalized statements that are made in COERs. And it's unclear not only to us as liaisons, but probably for the promotion board members, that they're not quite sure exactly what you've done. So we want to make sure that how you write your accomplishments is really clearly identified on what you've accomplished in that rating period. And then avoid, I will say, the fluff and can statements. It does not provide any substance or any ability for a promotion board member to understand what you've done. And in addition, I would also say plain language. Because we now have those combined promotion boards, you may have a dietitian sitting as a board member and that they're looking at a package from a different category, and they may not quite understand what you do. But if we put it in plain language, they can probably decipher what you are doing in your job and in your role. And lastly, we really encourage being actionable in your statements. What did you do? How did you did it? And what was the impact to the service unit, to the area, to the agency? Whether you're at a federal, tribal, or urban program, how did you do what you did? And what was the impact to that facility, that area, or the agency? So a few tips that we wanted to offer is ensure that you meet all the established deadlines. One of the big things is it is flexible. So a lot of back and forth goes between the officer and the supervisor, and that's perfectly fine. If you do have a supervisor or reviewing official that may not be so responsive and it's coming up on their deadline, reach out to your regional liaison. We can engage with the rater or with the reviewing official just to check to see, are they having issues accessing the system? Do they understand what they need to do in their portion of the core? And so a lot of the times we can help them along in that process to get your core moving in the right direction. We also encourage officers to engage their supervisors throughout the year. Ask them, how am I doing? Is there something I need to do more? Is there an area that I need to improve in? And that way throughout the year, you understand kind of what are the expectations of your supervisor, because expectations can change as we get new processes, as we get new procedures, as we get new equipment. Some of those things that we do, we have to redevelop and we have to manage expectations. And so reaching out to your supervisor to say, hey, I want to have a sit down just to see how I'm doing. Is there any other areas I need to improve in? Is there something that you see I can lead? Can I get engaged? If there's a new process that's being developed, hey, supervisor, can I get involved? Because one, I'm really interested in this, but two, I think that I have a lot of information that I can offer, suggestions that can make this process better. So I think it's definitely having that conversation with your supervisor is going to be helpful. I always encourage everybody to have that working file throughout the year. Even I do, as a civilian in my role, I have an accomplishment sheet that sits in the corner of my desktop. And anytime that I think that I did something big or that it could have a huge impact on the Corps or on our officers, even if it's an impact in DCPS, I just make a quick note just to say, just as a reminder to myself, this is what I did. And develop it over time. Then as I see the impact as it comes through, then that's when I'll start to develop those impact statements as well. And that way, when it comes to the end of your COER season, and you have to document those accomplishments, you know exactly what you've done, and there's no questions, or you really just fine tune what you've done throughout the year. Information included can only be during your core time. So for our inter-service transfer officers, for any of our new call to active duties, it starts when you were commissioned. If you do have some sort of comparison during, you can include that, but really is focused on the rating period for that COER. All COERs run from 1 October of the previous year to 30 September of the new year. So really keep a close eye out on how you write those accomplishments, dates that you put in those accomplishments, because we want to make sure that it's within that rating period. The one exception that we do include is if you're doing a comparison, and there is an example here, GIPR scores increased from 2023 to 2024. You're showing a comparison of whatever you did and how you did it. It has then increased that GIPR score from one year to another, and that's perfectly fine. But we want to make sure, like I said, has to be within that rating period. So one of the big things I'll emphasize is I will say of all of the documents we have, one of the most important is our COERs. 40% of that promotion. So how are we doing our job, and how can we describe what we're doing, not only for our patients, our facilities, our areas, and our agency? What are we doing? Because that holds the most weight when it comes to that promotion cycle. We really want to tell a story. I am impressed at what our officers do day in, day out. I have the privilege to sit as the awards board coordinator, and I get to read all of your awards. And it is impressive what our officers do. And so we want to make sure that we capture that on our promotion documents as well. I will say avoid focusing on the scores, the actual number scores. One of the most important things that has been reemphasized over and over, and what we've heard is that it's not necessarily the scores that are important, it's what's written. How do you support that leadership aspect? How do you support that innovation, the initiative? How do you build that rapport, the soft skills with people internally and externally to your organization? So it's not just the scores that are on that COER, but what are you doing? What is that impact and that accomplishment to what you've done throughout that year? And that really goes to that narrative. That narrative plays the most significant role, not only for officers' accomplishments, their goals, and their duty description, but also the supervisors. And that is something we will emphasize with the supervisors, is what they write is really going to weigh heavy when it comes to promotions. We also wanted to just encourage officers that it should be job specific. What are you doing in the role that you're serving? Do not include any of your commission core requirements, basic readiness, how you wear your uniform, any of your mandatory certifications, any of those committees you're attached to. And the reason why is because that should go on your officer statement. And we do have a promotion season that will go over the officer statement later this month, just to help officers understand what should be written in that officer statement. But really, your COER is focused on what are you doing in your job. So what we want to do is go through a few examples that we've seen throughout a couple of years for COERs, and we really wanted to kind of look and show how it could be expanded. Now, this does not apply to everybody. We did try and take a few that are outside of different categories, but it's really taking those very canned statements that we've seen in COERs and expanding it. Numbers are made up in these examples, so it is not official from a core, but the original was from a core. So anytime that you're talking about being part of a committee within your service unit, in our examples, the chair of the pharmacy expansion committee, one of the big things that people have tend to do is just put what their title was. And that's great because it shows your leadership as the chair of a committee. But we want to know, what have you done with that committee? What's that significance and importance to that role you served as that chair? So what we did is we improved the statement is that you led 3 teams to implement a pharmacy mail out, improve processing lines, and increased output from 2,300 prescriptions to 4,000 daily. What that does is it provides context to exactly what you did. It also provides a lot of feedback to a promotion board member to say, wow, that's a huge increase of 2,300 prescriptions to 4,000 daily for a small facility. That could have a significant impact for a service unit or for even a small community. On the next one, impaneled 1,323 patients for outpatient services. Again, huge number. That is a lot of patients to be impaneled, but what did you do for those 1,323 patients? So modified calendar appointment scheduling for a 5-minute overlap, increased daily schedule for additional 5 appointments, and increased impaneled patients from 923 to 1,323, and decreased appointment wait times by 6 days. What it does is it shows what you did, how'd you do it, and what was the impact. Reducing those appointment times by 6 days is huge for some of our patients, especially depending upon their medical situation. So really putting it into context on what did you modify and really what was the impact, what was the end goal. I will say this one's a little bit long, so bear with me. Oversaw the delivery of the EPA Clean Water Act Technical Assistance Interagency Agreement, including approval of new funding for FY19, printed and distributed hard copies of the updated SDS guide for the areas, contracted a Section 508 compliance, and published it on the IHS website, developed a training plan for the new SDS guidance and delivered to the areas of 4 separate sessions, and provided guidance to the Bemidji, Oklahoma, Billings, and Albuquerque areas in developing the area-specific SDS guide. That's a lot, but I have no idea what you're talking about. So I think cleaning up a little bit, providing a little bit more context helps to identify kind of what that role you are serving in and what did you do. So what we did is improved it by saying lead delivered EPA Clean Water Act Technical Assistance Interagency Agreements. That's what you did. How did you do it? You developed the guidance, hard copy and electronic, and trained how many number staff that you did in 4 sessions. And then technical lead in the development for 4 of the 12 areas SDS guidance. What that does is, as you can see, going from 6 lines down to 3, now you have more room to include another accomplishment. There is no right or wrong way. You can write it in sentences, you can write it in bullets, but really get to the meat and potatoes of what you're trying to convey. And that's really most important, is that we want to make sure that what we're including is that it's clear, concise, and really to the point so people understand exactly what you're doing. Okay. Last example we have is edited the NCC Internal Medicine Resident Handbook. So what we improved it as is lead editor for NCC Internal Medicine Resident Handbook. That's what you did. How did you do it? I updated 6 sections and coordinated with SMEs on updated technology and processes. And then what was the outcome? It implemented handbooks both electronically and hard copy, reducing processing time of admin documentation from 2 weeks to 3 days. So really it puts kind of in that flow, that pattern of what you did, how you did it, and what was the impact. So I will say liaisons, we're here to help. Absolutely. Mentors are here to help. Your leadership is here to help. Really, what we want to do is refocus on getting to kind of that clear and concise language in the officer's accomplishments and refocusing on how and what you're doing in your job. Again, we do some amazing work in Indian Health Service, and I am always impressed in what our officers are doing. What we now need to do is convey it in our core. Make sure that we have those really solid accomplishments and really what we've included and what we've done in that year. So I will absolutely open up to questions if anybody has any questions. Yes, Commander Green, I will absolutely send the slides out after the meeting. It will be attached to the invite so anybody can access the slides.